Hello, and welcome to the Lux Research webinar on Healthcare in Asia, a golden opportunity. My name is Yuan-Shen Yu, and I lead Lux Research's Asia research team. Our speaker today is Nardev Ramanathan, an analyst based out of our Singapore office. Nardev leads our digital health and wellness coverage area and is a key contributor to both the digital transformation of physical industries and emerging ecosystems in agri-food and health programs. Nardev has deep expertise in genomics, digital therapeutics, and personalized health solutions. Prior to joining Lux, Nardev led the precision medicine and digital health practice in the Industrial Development Group at the Agency for Science, Technology, and Research in Singapore. If during the course of Nardev's presentation, if you have any questions for him or about Lux Research, please type them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar platform. And at the end of the webinar, we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. Before we get started, a few words on how Lux Research helps companies like yours navigate the innovation landscape and find new business opportunities with emerging technologies. The largest question we get from our clients is, how do we find and foster new growth? Certainly, it is not an easy and actually quite complicated question. If you're the head of innovation, head of strategy, head of product development, or corporate venture capital, many questions must be answered quickly so you can define your strategic decision. You must understand the market landscape and its key players. You need an in-depth understanding of the technical specs of some of these new, very early stage technologies. You must clearly identify the opportunities and the risks associated with them. And that's really where Lux Research Analysis comes in. Companies today need to supercharge their growth strategies with the right data and insights to get at the what, who, and when of technology innovation. Lux provides that expert curation of data developed from our advanced analytics platform, plus domain knowledge from our technology experts to identify the key market trends and indicators and help you decide what you should do about them going forward. We're the leading provider of tech-enabled research and advisory solutions, helping our clients drive growth through technology innovation. So today, as a demonstration of our approach, I'd like to now pass things off to Nardev to provide a brief analysis of the healthcare innovations in Asia and the opportunities for all of you in this space. Certainly, if you have questions about Lux Research or what we do, please ask them in the questions box or follow up with us directly. Nardev, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks for that introduction, Yer. My name is Nardev Ramanathan, and I lead the digital health and wellness practice at Lux Research. Healthcare is an industry that's facing major challenges today, and Asia is no different. However, Asia faces some unique challenges, and here I'll share some of our analysis on the current and expected trends in Asia, and what are some near-term opportunities you can capitalize on so as not to miss out on this golden opportunity. First, I'll speak about challenges in the global healthcare system in general and move on to address a more specific challenge in Asia. Then, I'll identify a couple of opportunities which you can start to tap into right away. And I'll end off by sharing what we think winning strategies might look like and share a couple of examples of companies already moving in this direction. So let's have a look now and see what these global healthcare challenges are. First, healthcare costs have been rising exponentially. In 2016 alone, the world spent $7.5 trillion on health, representing close to 10% of global GDP. Total health spending is growing faster than gross domestic product, increasing more rapidly in low and middle income countries where it's close to 6% growth on average, than in, say, high income countries where it's closer to 4% on average. Second, the major challenge to healthcare systems is also around chronic diseases and aging. Chronic diseases alone cost around half of all healthcare spending, or around 5% of global GDP. People across the globe are also living longer, perhaps a testament to advances in medical technology and care over the years. This has also led to longer lifespans on average. People live almost 10 years longer on average today than they did in 1950. Individuals aged more than 65 years are projected to increase from 0.5 billion in 2010 to 1.5 billion by 2050. That's a tripling of that number. Third, and this is where it gets more relevant for Asia, is the rapidly shifting socio-demographics. The middle class segment is expected to increase from 27% in 2009 to 59% in 2030 globally, with most of that growth coming from Asia. In fact, around 90% of the global middle class growth by 2030 will come not just from Asia, but from three specific regions of Asia: China, India, and Southeast Asia. By purely absolute numbers, India will lead with 380 million, followed closely by China with 350 million new middle-class entrants. These numbers are larger than the entire population of the United States alone. Growth in the middle-class segment typically also means a rapid urbanization. One way to visualize urbanization trends is to look at how populations in existing cities change over time as more and more people move to cities. Now, on the y-axis or the vertical axis on this chart indicates the population of a city, and the x-axis or the horizontal axis indicates the number of cities with that population. I've included two Asian nations here, China and India, especially as we forecast them to be major contributors to the middle class growth globally. I've also included the United States and Germany, a European nation, here for comparison. In 1990, we can see that China, for example, has more than 60 cities, but with a population of around 300 to 500,000. But by 2018, we can see that the size of these cities, especially in China, have just exploded, with India not very far behind. And this just keeps going, and by 2030, we can see a number of the cities have now transitioned to megacities, especially in China, with at least 20 to 30 cities, expected to have populations of more than 5 million. This is larger than populations of entire European nations. Now, with all that urbanization happening at a rapid pace, the infrastructure and manpower to support urgent urban needs have hardly kept up. This is a graph that highlights the number of healthcare personnel for every 1,000 patients. I highlight World Bank data here from several Asian, European, and North American countries. You'll notice that developing nations like China, India, and a number of Southeast Asian nations here, like Indonesia and Philippines, have much lower doctor and nurse to patient ratio than developed economies in Asia like Singapore, or even in Europe and North America. And these are the same regions we forecasted earlier to contribute the most to middle class growth. So there's clearly going to be more sophisticated needs and challenges facing these healthcare systems, which must be addressed soon. So now that we've identified the major challenge, what are some strategies to address these gaps, and subsequently, what are the opportunities for you? So let's look at some opportunities available to us. We've identified limitations in infrastructure and resources as the main challenges today. This means we will need to optimize existing resources and decentralize as much as possible. Let's look at optimizing existing resources first. Now, optimizing existing resources is a low-hanging fruit here, and a real pressing need exists to address this. Optimizing resources today lie almost exclusively with employing AI or artificial intelligence to better monitor and anticipate needs. Now, Tan Tock Seng Hospital in Singapore is a leading geriatric center in Singapore and the region. Singapore also happens to have one of the highest life expectancies in the world, but also a rapidly aging demographic as well as a result. As the country's leading geriatric center, Tan Tock Seng Hospital operates at a very high occupancy and is constantly being stressed. In response to this, Tan Tock Seng has built an artificial brain to manage around 1,700 beds that combines all of the expertise and considerations of nursing, medical, and operations, and comes up with the best recommendation on the bed to be allocated. This has helped free up staff to focus on caregiving work. When a patient is admitted, they are tagged with a unique RFID tag that ties to their bed number. So when a patient's tag is deactivated at the point of discharge, it sends a few other messages, which includes a discharge message to the bed management unit, which then triggers a message for the bill and for housekeeping services. Only 2 staff are now required per shift to manage 1,700 beds, compared to previously where you need a team to do the same. It can even, based on historical data, forecast periods of high activity and plan to ensure the hospital is adequately resourced and staffed. Similarly, in China, a startup called Shanghai Senyi Medical Technology, or Senyi AI for short, is a medical solutions provider that develops data management platforms based on its core technologies in Chinese, natural language processing, or NLP, knowledge graphs, and deep learning. Senyi provides comprehensive data integration, governance, mining, and other technical support for the National Health Medical Big Data key project there. The company claims differentiation in taking a patient-centric approach by integrating inpatient and outpatient follow-up data related to the whole course of the disease. Now we've seen how we can leverage AI capabilities for optimizing existing resources. Let's look at decentralization. The concept of decentralization really is quite simple. In the traditional model of care, the patient goes to the site of care, which is typically your hospital, your clinic, hospices, rehabilitation centers, and so on. But in a decentralized model, that is reversed. The care goes to the patient, wherever the patient may be, typically at the patient's home. There are 3 ways to think about opportunities in decentralization, namely services, mobility, and connectivity, and I'll talk about them here. With services, digital health platforms like Babylon Health provide remote telehealth services with the convenience of a mobile device, and I'll speak a bit more about Babylon Health in a second. Digital caregiving services like Jaga.me and Homage in Singapore provide caregiving services directly to your home, typically targeting the elderly. For mobility, Grab and Gojek, mobility service providers and startup unicorns from Singapore and Indonesia respectively, are already looking to provide mobility services for medical appointments, ferrying care providers, as well as prescription medicine delivery. Medical appointment no-shows cost healthcare providers and insurers millions of dollars every year, just because the patients did not have access to transportation. Here, these mobility providers can fill the gap not just by supporting patients, but also supporting the movement of caregivers to where the patients are. Grab here has a JV with Ping An Good Doctor, a subsidiary of the largest health insurer in China, Ping An, to provide mobility and other online healthcare services. Gojek has inked a similar partnership with Dr. Anywhere in Singapore as well. Last but not least, and probably quite familiar to most, is the use of connected devices. We are all probably familiar with smartwatches and mobile devices, but developers like Apple and Xiaomi, are increasingly looking to support health needs as the lines between consumer wellness and healthcare gets blurred. Connected wearable makers like AWAC Technologies from Singapore are even developing portable dialysis machines. Even today, kidney dialysis has severe limitations where patients must make appointments and wait days to weeks sometimes. And when they do visit such centers, must lie on a bed and their whole day is basically gone. But imagine having on-demand use of these devices without breaking your routine. Now, connectivity within these devices also allows doctors to be on top of the patient's kidney health. Now that we've identified some opportunities to tackle, what is the best strategy to take here? Or what might a winning strategy look like? But to answer this question, we need to revisit the two major challenges that needs to be addressed in Asia, which is a need to optimize existing resources and to decentralize as much as possible. In thinking about these two strategies, it seems like they're both at odds with each other. The whole idea behind optimizing existing resources was really built around centralizing resources. When you think about the traditional hospital, the centralization of hospital personnel, equipment, and other resources enabled a more efficient, optimal way to provide care, whereas decentralizing seems to be going against this very concept. Hence, it seems like we might need to choose one or the other. Or do we? So Ping An Good Doctor, which I spoke about earlier, has developed AI unmanned clinics. Essentially, patients enter this 3-meter square clinic booth and chat with a cloud doctor called AI Doctor about their symptoms. After the AI algorithm sorts the patient's basic condition and symptoms, the system automatically transfers the patient to a corresponding real doctor, and the real doctor makes a diagnosis according to the patient's symptoms and prescribes medication. The AI doctor plays the role of assistant to the real doctor, effectively improving efficiency in responding to inquiries. And all of this happens in around a minute, also earning these unmanned clinics the name 1-minute clinics. The system would also include a smart medicine cabinet, which you can see here, that could dispense more than 100 different medications. This is in fact a critical step for the Chinese healthcare system, where there's a huge shortage of primary care physicians, and patients may spend sometimes an entire day waiting in line to see a doctor, even for common cold. Overall, this enables care to be delivered more optimally, but also in a decentralized fashion and in a scalable manner. Currently, these unmanned clinics are deployed in more than 50 Tier 1 cities in China in various public spaces such as shopping centers, schools, and pharmacies. Babylon Health, a British telehealth provider, combines both telehealth and AI-based triage to engage consumers and patients outside of traditional hospital settings on their mobile device. In collaboration with UK's National Health Services, or NHS, it has rolled out a service called GP at Hand, which uses AI to triage patients to doctors in minutes, and a video consultation can be arranged in under 2 hours. Prescription medicine from pharmacies will also be home delivered. Another example of optimization and decentralization here. Babylon Health has already established an office in Singapore, in fact, aiming to target the Asian market. It has joined forces with Prudential, a British-based insurance company with a huge presence in Asia, to tap into the Asian market. So what can we learn from all of this? Now, really, the key takeaways for today really would be first, that Asia's immediate need is to optimize existing healthcare infrastructure and manpower, and this is your near-term opportunity. A great way to do that is with AI, as you've seen with how Tan Tock Seng Hospital in Singapore is doing it in-house, and how Sydney AI in China is working with various healthcare organizations there to achieve more resource-efficient provision of care. Second, decentralization can be done through services, mobility, and connectivity, as I've pointed out, and presents both near and long-term opportunities. We've seen examples ranging from digital caregiving services to mobility providers like Grab, to developers of connected health devices. Last but not least, think of ways you can combine both optimization and decentralization for a big win. Companies like Ping An Good Doctor and Babylon Health are making great progress in expanding their footprint by leveraging this strategy. You could be doing the same. And with that, I end my webinar for today, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nardev. That was an incredibly informative presentation. As a reminder to our attendees today, if you do have any questions, please type them in the questions box in your GoToWebinar platform, and we'll answer as many as we can with the limited time we have left. I do see a few questions coming in, Nardev, so let's take a couple of those now. First question we have here is that seems like healthcare is a great opportunity and there's a unique Asia perspective to it all. However, healthcare is also very heavily regulated. Do you see any regulatory hurdles that will potentially impact your go-to-market strategies that you've laid out here? Any thoughts on that?
Thanks, Yuan-Shen. That's a great question. Healthcare regulators have, in the past few years, been reviewing and revising the guidelines on how to better enable health technology developers to pursue innovation without having regulation and bureaucracy hamper progress, as you've pointed out. The challenges I mentioned earlier, especially around unsustainable healthcare costs, is something that must be addressed. So healthcare regulators are cognizant of it, but they also need to roll out any measure in a careful, calibrated way. As the other thing we want to avoid is having the bar then set too low and have subpar products hit the market and potentially endanger lives and lead the public to lose confidence in the ability of regulators to regulate. Now, the US FDA has long been criticized for being slow and difficult to deal with when it comes to approval of new medical treatments, and more so with the advent of digital health and precision medicine. However, the appointment of Scott Gottlieb as the US FDA Commissioner in 2017 turned the US FDA to one of the most progressive regulators in the last couple of years, inspiring many other regulators in other parts of the world to rethink their approach in supporting innovation in digital health. One of the first major guidelines proposed was to approve selected digital health developers rather than a specific product itself. The rationale behind this was simple. Approving each individual application is not sustainable, both from the applicant perspective and the regulator perspective, more so with digital tools that are constantly being reiterated, optimized, and upgraded, that by the time the product is actually approved, it may very well be obsolete and not relevant for the market anymore. So the US FDA came up with a pre-certification program which approves the developer rather than the product. So as long as the digital health developer shows commitment to monitoring the real-world performance of their products once they reach the market, then they're in a good spot. The current list includes big-name developers like Apple, Fitbit, and Samsung, but the FDA is constantly reviewing the list, and perhaps your organization could be next on the list as well. In Asia, admittedly, most countries take a wait-and-see approach, taking the lead from the United States and Europe. However, that is also changing as we see major economies starting to lead the way independently. In China, for example, in 2018, the government rolled out policies to encourage the field of internet and healthcare together, pushing forward for a highly interoperable, collaborative, and connected healthcare ecosystem. In June of 2019, this year, the State Council promulgated the key tasks for deepening the reform of the medical and healthcare system in 2019, requiring relevant authorities to issue detailed regulations of internet healthcare services, charges, and reimbursement by social health insurance by the end of September of this year. Recently, according to the information on the official website of the National Healthcare Security Administration, the detailed regulations of internet healthcare service charges are being formulated with the first draft completed, and it is expected that the detailed regulations of internet healthcare service charges will be issued before the end of September. In India, India's CDSCO, or the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, is the national regulatory body there, analogous to the US FDA. has also been very proactive in promoting new ways to tackle this challenge. The CDSCO is another major organization like the FDA known to be notoriously bureaucratic. But in just the last few months, a couple of major announcements suggest that the healthcare regulator from the world's largest democracy is now taking a progressive stance as well. CDSCO has been very supportive of digital transformation efforts in clinical trials and pharma manufacturing processes to help speed up these processes to bring new treatments faster to the populace. With digital health, it is expected that CDSCO will engage more stakeholders. In fact, they've already engaged Abbott, who's just announced its digital services in India, the first country it is doing so at a national scale. The CDSCO has in fact changed its scope so much that the health ministry is now taking nominations for a name change for the organization. So the environment, as you can see, is becoming more nurturing and supporting of new and innovative thinking to tackle these healthcare challenges, and most certainly in Asia too.
Excellent. We have time for one more question. So in the presentation, you mentioned examples in Singapore and China. Could you highlight some innovative developers or developments in the other major economies in Asia, like India and Indonesia?
Sure, absolutely. Given the time limitation, I had to pick and choose a few examples here, but there are really a lot of developers emerging with new and innovative healthcare solutions that are either optimized and decentralized or do both in other parts of Asia as well. In fact, I just spoke to an emerging digital therapeutic developer in India called Wealthy Therapeutics. Wealthy develops a clinically validated app that is focused on chronic disease management and improving health outcomes through behavioral changes. Roche and Wealthy Therapeutics actually partnered last year to test self-management practices for type 2 diabetes using Roche's AccuCheck and Wealthy's digital therapeutic. The study found that those with the highest engagement with Wealthy's digital therapeutic saw the largest reduction in blood sugar levels. The results were especially encouraging because they were found in a real-world setting as opposed to a clinical trial setting. In Indonesia, a really interesting company to highlight is HaloDoc. The company has raised just under $100 million and boasts among its investors Bill Gates through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. HaloDoc makes a digital health super app that connects healthcare providers, insurers, patients, labs, and pharmacies in one mobile app. In fact, a small trivia here, this is actually Bill Gates' first investment in a digital health platform. And guess what? He chose an Indonesian startup, no less. Makes sense, as Indonesia is the fourth most populous nation in the world, with 260 million people, just behind the United States. And it consists of 17,000 islands stretching from the Indian Ocean all the way to Australia, making it difficult for a large proportion of individuals to get access to healthcare services. Now, HaloDoc is enabling this access. So very interesting times and very interesting developments in other parts of Asia as well.
Thank you, Nardev. We are just coming to the end of this webinar. Thanks again for a great presentation and taking some of those participation questions today. While we weren't able to get to all of your questions on the line, if you did submit one or still want to, please email us directly and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with a follow-up. For those of you who asked questions about receiving the presentation slides, we will be sending out the presentation material along with the recording to everyone that attended today. Make sure to also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and check out our blog for ongoing information and analyst insights. I wish everyone a great day ahead, and thank you again for your attention, and thank you, Nardev, for a great presentation.